Welcome to Easily Entertained. My name is Bryson Olson, and here we talk about all the good things about entertainment. There is a trilogy of animated movies, more like a franchise really, that has risen above all others. Quality, story, music, it's just all amazing, and you read the title, you know what it is. We are talking about How to Train Your Dragon, an absolute banger of a franchise, especially of the animation medium. Not much else can rival the How to Train Your Dragon franchise, so I thought we would discuss what set up and carried on the success of this series. We're not going to talk about the live action remake. Stick around for later this week. I'm going to be talking about that because I did see it and I do have some thoughts on it. So stick around. We'll get an extra video later this week. But first, let's dive into the franchise as a whole. So first off, obviously the story of How to Train Your Dragon is probably what sets it above most other franchises, is its story of friendship, of overcoming adversity and empowerment, and there's just so much stuff. It's just amazing. But really, it all started with the first one, with that story of friendship, of two unlikely creatures, a human and a dragon, coming together, and in fact a weak human at that. And I like how they changed it compared to the books, because I did read the How to Train Your Dragon books growing up, especially after I saw the first movie. It was awesome. And it was just interesting how they adapted it, because like they kind of kept a lot of the names similar, but they definitely didn't keep the overarching story the same. Like they kind of just were using the name basically. But I like that Hiccup is this scrawny little guy, and he trains the most fearsome, elusive, strong dragon, and it's great. It's like the perfect dynamic that they can use in this movie, and I love it. But I also like their friendship. I like that they grow together throughout the movies, throughout the entire franchise, including in the shows. You just get to learn so much about these people, and especially in the first one, you just learn about the little intricacies. They even say some of them outright, where it's like, when I looked at him, he was as scared as I was. But you also get these little nuances in the movie of like Hiccup seeing all the terrible terrors after the test drive scene, when Hiccup kind of blows fire into one of them, and they're like, oh my gosh, and it's like, oh, not so fireproof on the inside. That shows some learning that they're going to use later in the movie, but it also shows afterwards how it kind of just relaxes, that they're not just mindless monsters, they are just animals trying to survive. And that is what I think makes these movies so good, is the fact that they treat dragons as not monsters, as not mythical beasts or gods or anything like that, but just as animals with a very similar intelligence as humans. And in fact, they say that like in the second movie. And as you go on further, like a lot of people complain about the third one, how Toothless kind of gets more like puppy dog-esque. And I do think it sort of is the case, but I also think that is due to the writing really showing off that dragons and humans are so alike in how they think and how they interact with one another, that they basically share intelligence. They grow bonds with each other, and it's awesome. They just have like so much lore that they kind of build into the writing, but doesn't outright say most of it. That is what I just love about this series, is they use that show don't tell rule so much. And even when they do tell you things, it is usually essential for the characters to know. It's not really as essential for the like real life audience to see. In the first one in particular, how everyone hates dragons, and then Hiccup trains the dragon, and then he convinces everyone else dragons are good, and then they kind of try to continue that idea throughout the rest of the movies, and which is probably my one gripe, is that basically the conflicts are kind of the same in the future movies, where like they see dragons as beasts or things to conquer or to kill, rather than just animals that they can bond with. In the second one, I don't think like the idea is better than I think the third one. Like the idea of just killing dragons in the third one, I get it. It's like sort of as an antithesis to Hiccup. What if he killed the Night Fury instead? But the second one I think is pretty good because they understand the power of dragons, but they don't understand like the intelligence and the relationship between dragons. It's more like a master and a servant type relationship, and that I find really good. But just they've always done really well on the story, even in like the shows they've done really good. I know they were kind of more one-offs for a while, but then like was it Race to the Edge on Netflix? There were technically 2 on Netflix, I think, which I did watch, but it's definitely been a while. But I know they had more overarching stories that just connected really well together, and I like that. To have a good franchise, you really do just need well put together writing that just knows where it wants to go and what kind of story it wants to tell, and that puts How to Train Your Dragon already ahead of so many others. Another major aspect of what made How to Train Your Dragon so great was the animation. They blew it out the water from the beginning. Quite literally, the water in all the How to Train Your Dragon movies, absolutely amazing. It looks so realistic. It's kind of crazy. Even back in the first one, back in 2008, it looked unbelievable. It was kind of crazy just how they were able to achieve this, especially because a lot of things they said kind of ran into some problems, like the fire simulations. They kind of really just had to simulate true fire, and they had to invent, I believe, a new technology in order to actually make it work. Or with Toothless, because he was a black dragon, it just caused some issues with his rendering, so they had to figure out little ways to work around it so that it would better suit the animation medium. And it's just fascinating how they had to work out all these little intricacies or the details that they had in them. Even back in the first movie, you can see all the scales on the dragons, like in good detail. You can see the freckles and the little hairs on everyone's faces. It is just kind of crazy the level of detail that they were able to put in a movie, in an animated movie in 2008. Like, I get it, the animation medium was like pretty up there, I feel like, during that time, but a lot of it looked like Pixar or Disney, and there was like Shrek and stuff, which like was doing pretty good at the time, like, don't get me wrong, but I feel like How to Train Your Dragon really took it to that next level. I talked about Croods in another episode recently about how like they really kind of pushed DreamWorks as well, but this is kind of where it started, where DreamWorks really decided to take a shift and do that heartfelt, feel-good kind of story that was just different to what they were doing at the time, and that's what kind of has carried them more recently, I feel like. And they've just done so good. They've like constantly had good animation, and then in the second one they upped it even more, including like more of that water stuff. They introduced the ice, which was just really fascinating, being able to shoot hyper cooled water like from the Bewilderbeast. Getting to see that and watch it freeze like instantly and have it look like real ice, like, wow, that is what I would assume that would look like. And I love when we get like the concept art at the end of the movies, because that is just so much fun to see, like the different ideas that they all went through. Absolutely love it. It's just it's top tier. It's just such good animation every time. And like the new dragon designs, though, I gotta say, in the second and third movies, the new dragon designs, I feel like so many of them look the same. In the second one compared to the first one, not as bad, but in third compared to second, they all just look basically the same, which I don't really care for. I liked that so many of the dragons looked really unique before, and I know it was kind of because like they were limited on certain dragons, but like, come on, they're dragons, and like they had the whole book of dragons, which made them all look super unique. But after the second movie, like they all just had kind of that generic dragon type look, like generic cartoon dragon type look, which I was like, meh, come on. And I know, like, obviously making every dragon look unique probably isn't very feasible, but I would have liked to see more uniqueness, just because I think that does really well. And then you can just like really appreciate it a lot more. I understand why they didn't, but I digress. But I do just think the way they animated things and just how they improved on lighting and composition in the further movies, I think it was just great. Like in the third one, the lighting in specific, wow. And their like set composition and stuff. I loved all the golden hour type scenes, or the nighttime where they have like things lit by flame. They did that in like the previous movies as well, but I thought they did it just so well in the third one. While the third one isn't my favorite, it's definitely pretty up there with terms of animation quality. It was just so good. I love how they pushed animation for the time. It was so good, and now we get so many more good movies because of them, because they pushed it even further. Like, it was still sort of that Pixar hyper realistic style, but they took it to their own level. It wasn't supposed to be all like super cutesy, like it was cartoony, but still mostly realistic, I feel like, which I thought was great. So now kind of back to the writing a little bit. I love that How to Train Your Dragon is a closed-ish series. I always think that's great with franchises. Sometimes you can have too much of a good thing. I'm looking at you, Fast and Furious. While I enjoy some Fast and Furious sometimes, they started going a little bit too much. You're like, okay, it's ready for this to be done. Okay, sometimes you're like, I'm out. But I do like that this series kind of encapsulated itself. Then they kind of butchered it when they made the weird like 9 Realms dragon show or whatever, which looked so terrible. Animation quality completely destroyed. I don't know why they even chose to bring that little bit back. But I do like that for the most part, How to Train Your Dragon is a closed series. It has a beginning, middle, and end. And in all the movies, they have beginning, middle, and end. And I like when they can do that. It makes it feel good. And whether you like the end of 3 or not, I think it does work in the context of the series. And I think it's good. It brings an end to the franchise. And when I first saw it, I was like, oh, this is so good. This is so good. And like now, like I still think it's pretty good ending, but like at the same time, I'm like, this is kind of a weird ending. But I think with their whole story of friendship thing that they kind of had going, it felt like a good end. Friends having to part ways to protect each other. Because as you noticed, like throughout the entire franchise, not just in the movies, but in the shows as well, this was kind of just a recurring thing where while the Isle of Berk was like they were all good with dragons and they had dragon riders and stuff, everyone else, they wanted to exploit them, they wanted to kill them, they didn't respect them in the same way, and that made it a danger to all of the dragons and all of Berk at the same time. And that allowed for the end to kind of be like a proper send-off. Like, it may not have been executed in the best way, but I do think the idea of we have to part ways for safety, we have to say goodbye for now, I think is a good message. You know, it doesn't have to always be like, oh, and they lived on happily ever after. And I still think that could have worked in this series. But I also think that the way they ended it with sending them all to be dragons and be off on their own thing, I think is good. Sometimes you have to let things go and be to their own devices. I don't think all movies do that in a very good way. But I think these movies did. And I think had this series gone on for so long, constantly churning out more movies, we would have ran into more of the same kinds of issues. I was saying how like the story of 2 and 3 feels a little too similar to me almost. And just kind of 3 in particular kind of lacks the emotion and depth that I would really want. I think 2 did a lot better, but they didn't all do it as good as 1, of course. So had they gone on for way longer, as we see with the 9 Realms show, it doesn't work very well to push it out more than it really needs. And so I liked that they were able to find an end and execute it. You can argue whether it was good or bad, but they did it and they finished it off. And that's what I think makes it such a good trilogy, such a good franchise, is because they decided, here, this is where it's going to end. And then, of course, they have to recapitalize on the property and make it into live action. And, you'll hear my thoughts about that later this week. But overall, I think they did a good job of just capping it off and finishing the franchise as a whole story. It's one that I can always go back and rewatch the movies because they're just so good. They're such feel-good movies most of the time, even 3. And, you're never going to have a bad time watching a How to Train Your Dragon movie, or most of the shows, quite honestly. You will always have a good time taking in some How to Train Your Dragon media. That's just that's my opinion anyways. If you disagree, to each their own, but I think you're wrong. But yeah, that is my thoughts on the How to Train Your Dragon franchise. And so let's get into our rating. If you don't know our Easily Entertained rating scale, from least to best, it is garbage, once is fine, right mood, quotable, go to, and all day, every day. It's really no surprise. The How to Train Your Dragon franchise as a whole is an all day, every day. Specifically, 1 is an all day, every day. You may make some arguments for 2 and 3 where they could be an all day, every day, or it's more like maybe a go-to or right mood. But I think as a whole, the franchise is definitely a go-to for me. Definitely not the live action one though, but you're going to hear about that in a few days. So yeah, that is it for this episode of Easily Entertained. If you enjoyed, please leave a like and subscribe so you can be notified of new episodes when they release every Tuesday. It's always a great time. And if you have suggestions on any movies, TV shows, media, entertainment that you'd like to hear me talk about in the future, comment down below and, maybe I'll get around to it. But until next time, bye.